All right, good afternoon, YouTube. In today's video, I'm going to be continuing the simplified programming, Barney style workout information tips, whatever it is you want to call it. It's going to be kind of awkward. Amazon, you lied to me about the size of this easel, whiteboard holder, whatever. I like the pictures show people standing next to it. That does not happen with this. It does not get that tall. I will leave a positive review, however, if you sponsor me. So I am upset at the size, but we can change that very easily. But anyway, let's get into the topic of today's video, which is how to simplify your training program. Because when it comes to my programming series, there's a lot of concepts in it, but I feel like I could have done a better job at making it a bit more concise, a little bit more, you know, applicable, like a little bit more clear as to how you would actually write things down, right? So in the last video, I broke down a split, like how you would organize your week. And I made an argument for why a movement part split is going to be better. So the sample split that I brought up there was like a general size and strength split. So you have a bench press day, a deadlift day, a squat day, and an overhead press day. Not necessarily in that order. Um, for example, for myself, mine's more of a bench, squat, overhead press, deadlift kind of day, kind of split. So, in that, I also recommended that your workouts be as simple as you can possibly make it, and there's 4 basic criteria that you want to fulfill. When it comes to these slots, you can have as much bodybuilding work as you want, but you should make sure that these first 3 things are present in your program. In my opinion, if you were to try to maximize your physique, or at least start walking down the path to maximizing your physique, because you can't just maximize your physique with 3 exercises. You can't just rely on 3 exercises for anything. But you can, but what you want to do is that you want to make sure that you're hitting all your boxes, that you're like, crossing things out on the checklist, that you're hitting the big heavy stuff, and that is found with these 3 things. So let's say on a bench press day, the bench press is your main movement. And for your supplemental exercise, maybe you can go out of the plane. So the bench press is a horizontal press. So let's say you do a vertical press, you do dumbbell overhead press, or maybe barbell overhead press. And then after that, you do some back work. So that's one example. Another example would be you have your bench press. Then for a supplementary exercise, you do dumbbell bench press or close grip bench press, or um, let's see what else are some other good ones. Larson pressing, dips even. Those are all really good things that you could do. And then, of course, I would want you to follow that up with back work. So, back work is one of these really interesting things where you can have more than just one slot for back, but you must have at least one slot for back. So, if you are trying to get in and out of the gym as fast as possible, this is fine. If you, for example, are like me and you really want to just beat the absolute bricks off your back, then I would recommend that you have some back work in between the movements as well. So, for example, I like to have movements like antagonistic movements. So, in between each one, right? So, let's say I have the bench press here, I'll do a row right after. I have an overhead press here, I do some type of vertical pull right after. That's kind of what I mean by that. But that's an optional feature. What isn't optional is the necessity to train your back. You need to train your back. Sorry, allergies are kicking my ass. But anyway, so these are mandatory. You need to have your main movement, you need to have your supplemental exercise, and you need to have your back work. That is 100% necessary if you're, regardless of your goal, size, strength, doesn't really matter. And of course, bodybuilding work. Now, if you are size focused, size oriented, and you skip your bodybuilding work, I personally am of the opinion that you are not necessarily strength focused. Now, the reason why I say that is because size feeds into strength and strength feeds into size. These are all things that will feed into better muscle development in the long run, and these, like the smaller bodybuilding work, are all things that will eventually feed into your strength. Let's say, for example, you don't do direct tricep work, you don't take full advantage of training like small muscle groups that might help you train longer, in the like train longer meaning like staying injury free, avoiding overuse injuries, things of that nature. I do find that those are very beneficial, and that can be here. So even if it was to be something along the lines of just doing more back work, that's totally fine. Um, and then, of course, if you are strength focused, maybe there's less of a reason to do things like curls and lateral raises or things of that nature. But I don't think there's a reason to not go into the higher rep ranges, do a wider variety of exercises, and actually work on those things, right? So, now with the sets and reps, I know the lighting is not necessarily the best with this. I'm working with it, right? So, let me see if I can close this so I can actually like use the view docs. Okay, cool. So that kind of helped. But anyway, so we have for the main movement 1 to 5 reps or for a 5 rep max. This is basically if you use something like a top set. If you use something like top set, so top set back offset, you can do top sets of sixes, eights, maybe even tens. You can. Don't get me wrong. Like these are just very basic general guidelines. But generally speaking, like if you were to go as low as you possibly can, where I would recommend you do that is only on the main movement. I am very in like so this is something that I did personally, okay? This is something that I still see to this day, but it's also something that I did. I remember watching a video where it talked about doing 3 sets of 1 at 90%. And I respect the person who made it. Like he's still my favorite channel to this day. Like but I made the dumbass mistake of trying to apply that to my bench and then my barbell row right after. I made the mistake of trying to apply that to my squat and my deadlift right after. So that was maybe you could say that's like super powerlifting specific of me, but at the same time, it was a total waste of time and recovery because you only have one body, you only have so much time in the gym, right? So the what I want you to take from here is like whether you're doing 1 to 5 rep maxes or even like 5 to 8, even if you're doing like that, it doesn't really matter. Your rep max portion of it will be here. Now, this isn't to say you can't do things like AMRAPs. AMRAPs can fit anywhere, but you want to be a little bit smart with those. But anyway, when it comes to this, right, the rep ranges, these are also kind of indicative of the absolute, like, the most you should do as far as your main movement, the most amount of reps I'm comfortable recommending. Because here's the thing, how do you progress? How do you progress with these ranges? If your range is too wide, trying to force progression will be very, very difficult. So let's say you want to turn something that you can do for 1 rep into something you can do for 12. Likely not going to happen, like at least not within a reasonable amount of time. It usually takes a really long amount of time to kind of get into that. But let's say you want to turn something that you can do for, let's say, 5 reps, right? So let's say you do like a 3 by 5. Like I'm going to turn this and hopefully you can still see to an extent. But yeah, so let's say you kind of take this, right? Like the 2 to 8. The reason why the 2 to 8 range is there is because let's say there's a lot of numbers that fit in it. Let's say you do 3 to 5 or even 2 to 5, right? You can do an evolving rep range. You can do something like you do for your first set, you hit 5 reps. For your second set, you hit 3 reps. For the third one, you hit 2 reps. That's 10 total reps. And then I'm sorry, like I'm trying to modify this and play around with it. I'm not left-handed, so maybe I should actually be on the other side of the board, but we'll figure this out. So with this, you have 10 total reps. Next week, you can either maybe try to add a rep here on the last set. You can maybe, if the form wasn't all that good, you try to increase the form, but try to keep the same number of reps you did. These are all things that you can do. So when it comes to these rep ranges, it's not so much that this is what you want to use as far as your progression. It's just to say that when you are on this main movement, you want to focus on something a little bit lower simply because your main movement is for strength progression. Your main movement is where you try to apply like a bit more strength training, whereas everything else you can be a bit more, volume focused. Like that's a very simplified way of looking at it. But anyway, and then the reason why I put 10 to 12 out here is because this is like the absolute most. Like that if you are like in a high volume block, if you are a power lifter, or if you are just someone who really likes doing reps, or if you are a bodybuilder, this is where you can go to. Now, here's the thing: any number of reps build muscle. It's not necessarily that some build more muscle than others. It's just more so that some styles of training are just more sustainable than others. Singles are are high in stimulus, but you don't get much volume. You get a lot of fatigue for it, and their chance of injury might be higher on it. So depending on the person, depending on the form, and what else have you, right? So that is why when you compare the two, one is not necessarily recommended for hypertrophy. It's not because they are any better or worse at hypertrophy from like a rep to rep comparison, but just like more so practical over the long term kind of comparison, right? So when it comes to your main movement, some type of strength progression within this range, okay? Now, when it comes to your supplemental exercise, 4 to 8, 6 to 10, 8 to 12. This is a really simple way of going about things. One thing I'm going to kind of recommend is that let's say you like you choose this one, like you do like 1 to 8 rep max. This is the one you choose here. If you do 2 to 8, then you do that one. If you do 10 to 12, then you do 8 to 12. It's just kind of a way of like funneling down and make sure that you're in different thresholds. You don't want to be doing a 5x5 on literally every single exercise. And how do you make sure that doesn't happen? You mix things up at least a little bit. So let's say on this one, you decide that you want to do 5s. So here you should do 8s or 10s. And then on the back work, you decide that you want to go for 8 to 12. And then here you can do like 10 to 15, right? That's a simplified way of looking at this. I'm taking much too long to kind of just explain that this is kind of how you can go about things. But you can also say that let's say you do like you want to do some singles. Then here you want to do some 5s, and then here you're gonna do some 8s, and then over here you're doing some 10s. You know, like you're just working around things. Like that's so. But that's essentially what I'm saying here. When you're choosing your sets and reps, you just want it to be a little different because, for one, the exercises that you're going to pick into these are going to be different. You are not going to be having your barbell squat, or at least you shouldn't have a barbell squat or a barbell deadlift be done all the way down here in your bodybuilding portion. It just doesn't make sense. You're not getting the most out of the movement, and because of everything that happened before that point, you're just you're not being able to put your best foot forward, essentially. So you're not going to get the best out of it. So, so when you have your main movement, your supplemental movement, and your back work, these are all different exercises, and they should be treated differently. Like all I'm trying to say here with these numbers, and I have more in-depth videos on the channel going into it, as far as all the numbers, all the things I recommend, and everything like that. But all I'm trying to say is this: don't. So let me erase this. Sorry. Don't just think to yourself that if I do 5x5 on literally everything, I'm going to get big. Don't think like that. Don't think like that at all. Part of the reason, so this is just bad. Part of the reason is this: if you were doing 5 sets of 5, if you were doing a 5x5 on literally everything, sure, it might be able to push progression. You might be able to do all these things and kind of go from there. But the problem is this: if you do a 5x5 on everything, at least 2 to 3 of these sets don't really mean much, because for you to actually do straight sets with the same weight for 5 total sets, you have to be so far from failure that it might not be the most stimulative for hypertrophy. That is for hypertrophy. That's not necessarily for strength, right? Strength is a little different, but for the general population, like general strength, general size, it's still a good idea to not just do a 5x5 on literally everything. It's not a good idea to do singles on everything. It's not a good idea to just do 10s on everything. It's not a good idea to just apply one kind of rep range, one kind of training to every single exercise you do. The only there might be some exceptions out there, but even with that being the case, they still manipulate the number of total reps you do per exercise. The example that I'm thinking of right now is the rep goal system. Even in something like the rep goal system, where it's basically trying to get the most out of every single set you do, the if I were to kind of like break it down mathematically and like try to segment it out, it would still look very similar to what I had on the board previously. So let's say we look at the rep goal system by Steve Shaw. Great fucking system. It's a great way to build size and strength. Like if you really want to know how to build like a great base of size and strength, just follow his channel. Like he is one of the OGs of the game, I guess you could say. But anyway, let's say you have your main movement. Here you have something like 3 total sets you want to get the most out of, and you have a rep goal of 20 reps, right? So you have a rep goal of 20 reps. Let's say on the first set, you hit 8. Then on the second set, you hit 7. And then on the last one, you hit 5. Boom, you hit 20 reps. What does this look like? The 4 to 8 rep range. That's what I'm trying to say here, okay? Then on the supplementary exercise, are you going to try to do the same thing? I wouldn't. So let's say on the supplemental exercise, you have 3 sets to try to hit 40 total reps, or maybe 35 total reps, or even 30 total reps. So somewhere in that range, right? This will break down into maybe a set of 10, a set of 12 here and there. So maybe 12, 10, 8. And these are all sets taken to 1 rep shy of failure. And this is now 30 reps, or maybe, and then that might hit your goal. Or maybe you want something like a bit lower. So let's say 25 to 30 or something like that, right? You just want to be a little different with it. Then for your back work, maybe 40 rep ranges. And then here 50 or something like that. Trying to get the most out of every set. The main takeaway is that your volume should vary across your exercises. Partly it's because you want to take advantage of every single type of mechanism for hypertrophy. There are a lot of different things that will stimulate muscle growth. We don't know all of them, but we know practically some. We know that tension is a big one. That's what the main movement is for. That's why we're trying to push progression here. That's why we're trying to push heavy weights. Supplementary exercises. We know that volume is a very important one. But here's the thing, the main movement is focusing primarily on intensity. So we need another movement to kind of fill in with that volume for those same muscle groups, for that same similar movement pattern, or what have you. Then for having a balanced physique, I would recommend doing back work. Now, for training your back, while I'm a huge advocate that the back is the strongest and the most durable and resistant muscle, you should train your back like a bodybuilder, meaning you should stay within higher reps, maybe be like 4 to like maybe 15, like around there, like 6 to 15, like generally speaking across all your sets, just trying to stick within that range. For all your backward, just stick with bodybuilding, so that way when you kind of equate out the numbers, let's say here you do like, I don't know, between your main movement and your supplementary exercise, you do like 50 total reps, right? But then on the back work, you do like maybe 50 to 60, like just to balance things out. That's overcomplicating big brain, whatever, but like that's just kind of a way to look at it. But you just want to make sure that back work is there. If back work is there and you're doing it within like 8 to 12, 6 to 15 rep ranges, you're good. And then bodybuilding work, because some movements you are not gonna do 1 rep maxes on ladder raises. I don't need to tell anyone that that's not gonna be. I don't need to tell anyone that that's not going to happen. But what I do need to tell some people is that you're not going to be doing 5s on it either. Trying to do 5s on a lateral raise is going to not be all that beneficial to you, even if you think to yourself like, oh, I'm using all this momentum and then I'm controlling it on the way down. Yes, there is such a thing as stretch mediated hypertrophy, or like when you control the negative. But I mean, trying to do that on such a small muscle group, on such a disadvantaged movement such as that, and it's not even a movement where people don't progressively overload their lateral raises to be able to do 50s. Like it doesn't really matter how big your shoulders are, you're still going to be using like something below 30, 35 at most. So there's that. But when it comes to your bodybuilding work, yeah, you just want to be able to rep that out, because like I said, time under tension is not just doing things slowly, it's also just being able to do multiple reps of something. If time under tension is important for hypertrophy, you don't do that by just slowing down the eccentric. You actually do it by increasing the amount of reps you do, because the more reps you do, the more time you are under tension. So intensity, volume, time under tension, like trying to get the full range of motion through a wide variety of exercises. Because let's say your main movement is a deadlift, and for your bodybuilding work you do hamstring curls. It's because you don't get that part of the range of motion in a deadlift for your hamstrings, but you can in a hamstring curl. That's why it's there. So This is a very simple and easy way to kind of look at how the actual workouts themselves break down. And then in the next video, will be talking about some of my favorite exercises for each of the days. So let's say you have a bench press day, right? Then what I'm going to put in this slot. Because the thing is, the main movement doesn't just mean the competition style bench. It's there for sure because that's what it's based off of. But I'm going to actually go in depth with each of the best exercises so that way you can create a really good bench press day with everything else that I mentioned. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. My name is King, standstrength.com. If you would like to support the channel, I do have a Patreon, but I also have merchandise on my store, which is this. This is a very nice minimalistic logo right here. And if you know what it is, I want you to comment I want you to comment in the comment section below and tell me what this looks like to you. Have a good day.